Okay, good morning, everybody. Let's see. I'm having technical issues today. There we go. Okay. Well, welcome you all this morning. Excuse me. Let's start with, as we always try to, with do we have anybody new joining us today? John Kelly, glad to see you. And Kirk Bush, he wants to be here so much, he's on twice. Okay, doesn't look like we have anybody new joining us this morning. So let's jump into our agenda. That's weird. So let's start with Karen. Do you want to kick it off with an update on what's happening with with the broadband office?
I certainly will. Thanks, Steve. We are just continuing to, work on the projects with ABDG, digital equity, and the BEAD program. So for the ABDG program, we have 18 projects. All the contracts have been executed except for 2 that are under an extension. So we expect those to be executed by the end of this month. So then we can start work on those projects and getting that $100 million out the door. So I think everyone is aware of those projects that were funded. There was 75 million for rural Arizona and 25 million for Maricopa and Pima counties for last mile projects and some middle mile projects as well.
Karen, is that information on your website?
Not yet, Steve. We're looking at revamping the ACA website. There's just so much content for broadband that the current structure just doesn't lend itself to put all that information up there. But we're working on that part of it, and hopefully in the next month or so we'll be able to expand that and put all that information up. We're actually looking at some kind of a dashboard so you can see progress on all of these projects, which I think would be really cool.
That'd be really great.
Yeah. For digital equity, the digital equity program manager position was posted. So ACA is accepting applications for that position. Steve, I sent you the link to that. So if you want to share that with the group, that'd be great. Please share it widely. So we're looking to see about getting somebody on board for that position.
Karen, can you just remind people quickly what that position is? And you don't have to go on the lengthy job description, but just quickly.
So ACA is the administrating agency for the digital equity grant planning program, as well as the capacity grant program that's going to be coming, at the beginning of next year. And this digital equity program manager is going to be overseeing all the strategic initiatives for digital equity at the state level, and being a project manager for those capacity grants that ACA will eventually award out. But it's really that conduit at the state with all of the local nonprofits, local governments that are doing work in the digital equity arena. So it's a big job, and it's a statewide effort.
Thank you.
So like I said, that is posted. I don't believe there is a closing date on it. I think they're just going to accept applications until they feel like they have a good pool of candidates. So the digital equity plan is currently under development. We met yesterday with our contractor DEI and had a good discussion about the plan itself and the goals and objectives and some of the direction of the strategy for the state. we're still on track to release for public comment October 16th. There'll be a 30-day public comment, and we will post that draft report on the ACA website. And we're looking at other modes of communication and outreach to get that report out to our covered populations and, folks that may not necessarily have the ability to go on a website and, provide public comment. So there's a couple firms that work with some of the local governments, and they have the ability to, excuse me, I'm sorry, there's somebody with loud equipment outside my window. But they have the ability to assist an agency with different modes of the report to be able. I'm sorry, can you guys hear that?
Yes, no, we're fine.
It's like literally I think the neighbor they've got equipment and it's really loud. So, okay, if you can't hear it, I'll just ignore it. So this company will be able to provide hard copies and distribute them to, libraries or different entities, for, public comment and gather that. There's like a voice comment technology that you can call in and then just recite your comments, and then they transcribe that and put that into a document for ACA to use. So it's pretty interesting, some of the new technology that's out there to assist with this process. But we really will be looking at our stakeholders to help us distribute this report to get this public comment back. Like I said, it's a 30-day public comment period, so it will close mid-November. ACA will take all of the comments and address those and revise the report as needed, and then the report will be submitted to NTIA sometime mid-December, and then it has to go through a whole review process at NTIA before approval, and then we really don't have any figures yet on what that capacity program will look like come next year, but we're anticipating sometime late spring next year. I know Nicole is on the line too, so she may have a little bit more information, but that's the timeline that we're working on right now. So Nicole, do you have anything to add on?
Yeah, I'd say it's Washington, D.C. spring, not an Arizona spring. So, late March, April, we'll see.
Okay. Yeah. And, we keep hearing that, the state's going to get 20 million. Oh, the state's going to get 60 million. Cole will, reinforce this. We need to let people know that there is no dollar amount that has been verified for these capacity grants. So if you hear something, it's pure speculation. So don't get too wound up about what a dollar amount that you hear that's coming to Arizona until it's official from NTIA. Let's see. I think so. I heard Alana say earlier that the governor is going to sign the proclamation for Digital Inclusion Week. So that is in the works. As I said, we don't have a digital equity manager, so we're going to try to do a little bit of outreach and social media, but we're going to be limited to the extent of what we can do that week. But here to support our stakeholders on that. Anybody have any questions about digital equity before I go to BEAD?
No. Oh, I don't. Anyway, anybody else?
Okay. So the BEAD program, I reported last week that the 5-year action plan is up on the ACA website. It's open for feedback. That particular report did not require public comment, but we do have an option on the website for feedback on that report. We have shifted now to what we call the initial proposal, which is made up of 2 volumes. Volume 1 is essentially the challenge process, and Volume 2 is the remainder of the initial proposal, which includes the subrecipient selection process. That report is due December 27th. It does have a public comment period. Our goal is to have a draft available for public comment probably the first part of November. And again, that is due December 27th. So a lot of work it goes into, those 2 volumes. So we're working on that. Sandeep is scheduling county outreach meetings. If our digital equity manager is on board, that person will probably attend with him as well. So the goal is to get out there across the state and sit down one-on-one with the local governments and the stakeholders in the community and answer any questions and just be available for them as we go through these planning efforts. Let's see. Okay. As part of the BEAD program, ACA's hired a tribal liaison, Candace Hamada. I'm going to try to get her on one of these calls, Steve, and just give you or give AZBSN just kind of an overview of what she's been doing, what she's working on. But she is she's one person, a powerhouse. She's already met with, I think, 15 tribes, and she's scheduled to meet with several more next week. So, her charge is to go out and, talk with the tribes and work with them, find out what their needs are, find out how we can, help with, their digital equity as well as infrastructure, programs, and incorporate those needs into our BEAD planning effort. Sorry. Then let's see. Oh, and then the last thing I had to update was we were originally planning an Internet for All event at the end of October. We've pushed that back to January. There was some conflict on some folks being able to attend, including the governor, but we just felt that with all of the planning due dates coming up here in October, November, that it was just best to focus on, the deliverables for these reports. And we're going to push that event back till January. So, and I think that is about it for my update. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
So Karen, I'd like to offline, we don't take the time today, but I know we've talked about trying to schedule a time for this group to have a separate meeting, not our Monday meeting, but a separate meeting to have some discussion about both the BEAD and the digital equity plans. And so I'd like to talk about how we can best do that.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, like I said, the digital equity plan, the goal is to release that for public comment October 16th. And so maybe that's something that AZBSN wants to have a work group and, review and provide comments. The BEAD volume 1 for the challenge process that I think, AZBSN could probably have a separate working group for that one as well. That will be a little bit later, a couple weeks after the digital equity plan is released.
Okay. Sounds good. Any questions for Karen?
Hey, Karen, this is John. Karen, this is John. Just a quick question for you. Hey, good morning. Nice to be back. I like the 8 o'clock time, by the way, Steve. Thank you. I was down, John. Well, it's all about me, Steve. Some of us were down at the League of Cities conference last week down in Tucson. Nicole, you and I were there at the broadband session, which was at a nice time of the afternoon. The digital equity meeting was at 8 a.m. in the morning. Did not get well attended. I would say the takeaways that I heard from the cities, or at least from the panel that was brought to the cities about some of the barriers to make sure this whole program is successful related to cities' ability to manage the permit requirements associated
Mhm.
with some of the infrastructure development, as well as just the labor force associated with, you know, fiber, fixed wireless, and things like that. So I thought those were interesting and good takeaways. I don't know how the cities are going to deal with that, particularly the smaller cities. Do you have any thoughts about that, or maybe that's another convening conversation we should be having?
You know, that is, it's a really good point, and that is something that we've heard loud and clear from, you know, the local governments is the concern about the permitting, you know, process. You know, and with all fairness from the ISPs as well, is, you know, their ability to get, you know, these permits through, and all of, you know, they're all going to be coming at these local governments all at the same time. So there are some discussions, you know, happening on, you know, different strategies on how to address that. We have a meeting this afternoon with CSA and, you know, ongoing discussions with the league. So I believe some of those comments are coming in as feedback on that 5-year plan, because we did address that as an obstacle and a barrier. So any ideas on that? Please, you know, bring that forward to ACA so we can, you know, just gather that information and try to strategize on, you know, the best approach for that.
Thank you.
So Karen,
And
oh,
I'll
sorry,
add,
John, did you have more? Go ahead.
Nope.
oh, I'll just add that in the, and you know, there's a chance to provide comments on that in the 5-year action plan that ACA has posted, but it's also a required section of what's called volume 2 of the initial proposal. So that's where the state has to account for cost and barrier reduction. So that's where we expect to see solutions and you know, representations of from local governments around permitting especially. So there'll be chances to provide input to help the state in drafting, as well as to comment once that draft is out for public review.
Thanks, Nicole.
So
And
Karen,
Bill-
so Karen, you, as you know, that the state's been, when I say the state, I don't mean state government, but local communities have been very successful in creating broadband action teams. Are we doing anything in that space and helping local governments and local communities to develop these broadband action teams and come up with plans as a part of the BEAD process, or not?
So, you know, I know that is something that Sandeep has talked about, is really encouraging these local communities to establish these broadband action teams. I'm not sure if that is something that we specifically addressed in the 5-year action plan, but again, I think that is really a grassroots local effort. And if a community is interested in that, I'm sure that Sandeep is, you know, is willing to help, or ACA is willing to help, you know, establish that. I also wanted to touch on John's other comment about the workforce. Again, that was a barrier, an obstacle that we addressed in the 5-year plan. And it's also part of the digital equity plan, is you know, how to address the workforce. And you know, in there's 2 kind of components of that. On the infrastructure side, how do you get qualified workers to come in and build and, you know, do, you know, the engineering and all that. And then on the digital equity side, you know, how do we train our workforce, you know, to be able to provide services in this new environment. So ACA, I mean, that's kind of their cornerstone is workforce development. So we're going to be meeting with OEO, I think is their acronym. They have a workforce development plan, and seeing how we can integrate that into both, you know, digital equity and, you know, BEAD programming for workforce development.
Okay. So Karen, the other thing is that some of the conversations we've had in the past is talking about so it's talking about broadband action teams, but really expanding that to broadband and digital equity teams, and creating those teams in local communities, and not just for infrastructure, but for the digital equity strategy. Has there been any talk about that?
Like I said, Steve, I think that is a local initiative, and this is a small group of people. We see our names and faces in variety of different settings. So I think you're right. A broadband action team will probably consist of both your infrastructure folks and your digital equity folks. Just because a lot of these communities are small and don't have a lot of different folks that are involved in that. But again, I would say that this is a local initiative, and certainly the state can provide guidance and assistance. And I'll actually bring that up today when we have our call with CSA and see what their thoughts are on what kind of guidance ACA can provide. Unless Steve, if you have any ideas of what the state's role would be in a local broadband action team.
Well, and I don't want to take a lot of time to discuss that today, Karen, but it seems to me that, in the previous discussions and even in the plan that we had developed a couple of, a long time ago, is the need to be able to provide assistance to those folks, technical assistance, as well as a facilitator, technical assistance, and helping them to find this, as you discussed earlier, the staffing to be able to do that, either through consultants or their existing, their existing staff. And so, to me, that at least I think, in the discussions we've had in the past, that those are important. Related to that, and this was also part of the discussion we had when we developed the plan, was that the Arizona Economic Recovery Center does provide that kind of support. I mean, I don't know how big their capacity is, but I know they've also been meeting with local governments, not just specifically about broadband, but they do have consultants on staff, and they also pay for consultants specific, and they can do that specifically for broadband. So I think that is something that we should really explore, because in my opinion, that's going to be a big barrier to people applying for funding, is that they don't have the staff to do the plans. So we can talk more about that offline, Karen, but those are just some of the things that come to mind for me.
No, that's great, Steve. I've got a couple notes here, and I see that the Economic Recovery Center is part of Local First.
Yes.
Okay.
And we've met with them, and they've actually presented to AZBSN a couple of times. And, the conversations I've had with them, again, I don't know how huge their capacity is, but they keep saying they want to help with this in some way, shape, or form. So I think that certainly for ACA and I'm sure that you guys have been in touch with them, but specifically about broadband and how they can help is particularly important right now.
No, great point, Steve. Like I said, I've made a couple notes, and I will follow up.
Okay. And again, Karen, I guess related to that is, again, when we did our report, that we have talked about that there's other funding sources besides government. And and again, that's where they can also be of help, is to identify what other sources of funds are out there and how can they take advantage of those, again, to help with their planning and implementation. And I think that's really important because, again, as we talked about, and certainly government plays a really important role in infrastructure development, but certainly for digital equity and other kinds of things, that there are foundations and private and companies and all who provide funding, and we need to help them. I've been trying to include, and I know Andy has done a great job of sending me information about different funding sources, and I try to include those in our newsletter. But I do think that's important. And again, I think that's something that the Economic Recovery Center can help with. So I'm done. Anybody else have anything else that they want to comment on? Hello? Are you there? Okay. All righty. Thank you, Karen. Great job.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah. And so, Nicole, you have anything else that you want to share that you haven't already?
Sure. Yeah, I'm really glad Karen's on board to kind of help with the status updates and overviews. I think as you're discussing about this group, maybe having some sort of working group around the initial proposal, I'd like to just make myself available for like an initial proposal 101 session for that group, so you can, it's I have a lot of very text heavy slides about all of the requirements that are involved. So that can give this group a little bit of a baseline as you start to dig into those drafts. So let's figure out how to schedule that.
You bet.
Yeah.
So I'll talk with you and Karen about how do we best make that happen.
Perfect. I think just the other thing that I would add is that a couple of weeks ago, Governor Katie Hobbs announced a interagency and community broadband advisory council, which is comprised of state agency leadership and their designees. That first convening is going to be this Monday, September 11th. So I think we'll be able to share some readouts and summaries of those discussions, as well as the ensuing working groups from that broader council. So this is really exciting. As you know, Arizona didn't have a advisory council of this type before. So we're happy to see that it's a priority, and to see how perhaps it's a bit of a government solution, not quite a community solution, but some good discussions will be coming out from a lot of different perspectives around the state.
Okay. Thank you,
Nicole. Mark Goldstein. Simple correction, though. I would say that we did have something similar back in the
during the planning. Yes.
2011. No, during 2011 to 2013, there was a Governor's Digital Arizona Council of public and private members, and they had a draft strategic plan in 2013, which seeded Karen's work on our 2018 later strategic plan. So we have had that once before, but glad to see it come back.
And that's why we're so grateful to have the historians still with us to remind us of where we've been. And that's, it's really exciting to kind of see all of this work over all the years come to fruition now. So money
actually, Karen, that was probably one of 3 or 4 councils that were created over time.
Yep.
Spent a lot of time working on them, and then they disappeared.
Exactly.
All it took was $1 billion to, really make it happen. Right?
Funny thing about that, huh?
Yes.
Okay. Any other
sorry
questions?
for that omission, Mark. I was under the impression it was formed for the purpose of the strategic planning, and then it wasn't sustained. So
sure.
But yeah.
No. And one more thing, Steve, since we're on digital equity, I don't have any more information about it. But I did post that the Digital Equity Institute and Shaping EDU will have a virtual Arizona Digital Inclusion Celebration Summit on October 3rd. And that's to kick off Digital Inclusion Week. So free registration, and the details and registration are at the link I embedded in the chat.
Okay. Karen, do you have any time a little later this morning or this afternoon for us to chat for a little bit?
Steve, I have this afternoon is pretty busy. I could probably do something like probably 10:30, 11, if that works for you.
That would work for me.
Okay. Do you want to just give me a call?
I will.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else for Karen or Nicole?
Just a question for Nicole or anyone else broadly. Are the panel which you spoke, are their meetings public or not public?
So they are appointed members of the council by the governor's office. Those quarterly meetings are not public, but they'll be establishing working groups on a handful of topics around broadband deployment and digital equity, in which those appointees, and we're talking like the director levels of state agencies. We'll name designees for those monthly working groups. And I understand that they, as those get formalized, that they intend to open those working groups up. So we'll have to stay tuned about invitations to the public for those. So to summarize, quarterly meetings with the appointees and then monthly working group meetings forthcoming.
Thank you, Nicole. Anything else? Okay, so just moving on quickly. So you all know that we are working on developing a cybersecurity task force. It's been a little bit of a challenge to have our 3 leaders of that group, and trying to schedule them has been a real challenge, but we are working on trying to figure out where we're going. I have about a dozen people, and I'll be glad to share that to start with. And it's not intended, that group has not met yet, but the intent is that we want to kind of map out where we might be going, and then open it up to anybody who wishes to participate. But we know that this has become a particularly important issue, and keeps popping up everywhere about the importance of cybersecurity. So I don't know, JT, if you want to say anything more at this point about that.
No, Steve, I don't have any further comment at this
Okay.
at this point.
So we do hopefully I can get those folks together and move this process along. While we're
Steve?
talking, yes, go ahead.
This is Mala. I'd
Mala.
like to share with the group, I attended the New Hampshire's cybersecurity webinar, where they were talking about how different groups came together and did, and worked on cybersecurity. And the whole aim of this was that they use federal funds that they had received, including the CARES Act money and everything else that they had received, to shore up their cybersecurity in the state. They also talked about, doing something to, doing some planning work using the BEAD money and the digital equity money. They talked about especially capacity building and using folks like 211, FCC's 211 help desk, which receives a lot of calls, having them be aware of, what training materials are available free of cost, what other resources are available around the state, linking 211 to things like our Arizona Connect, making sure that they have the resources at their fingertips. So again, that really helps us think about trying to contact the 211 help desk folks and see who's in charge, whether they can send someone to our meeting so that they are aware of the resources that exist and how they can help people stay safe. They talked about the number of queries that their help desk receives about, oops, I clicked on something and I don't know what's going on. You wouldn't think that the 211 would get those kind of calls, but they talk about a lot of those calls being about someone clicking on some phishing, emails and things like that. They talked about trying to get those people, the people at 211, aware of talking to people about weak passwords, about multi-factor authentication. And we normally don't associate those kind of things with a 211 help desk, but that is an important thing that we need to think about. And there are training materials already available free of cost at Skills Common, and I'll put those links in the chat once I'm done talking. And at murloc.org, They also have something called CAST.org. And all of those trainings are available free of cost. We just need to make 211 aware of it so that they take it, as well as let people who end up with those cyber threats to take those calls. So I think that was kind of a summarization of that more than 2 hours of that webinar. But again, it just specifies the importance of doing it and doing it soon. So I am as guilty as the rest of us about not having the time to focus on it, but certainly let's get our team together, Steve, and work on these aspects. Though some of them are very simple to do. Just make sure that we know how to do it. That's all. And we.
So Mala, I just today saw that information about that webinar, and unfortunately, it's already passed. Do you know if they're planning to record that?
Yes, they are. They are, and I can pass the recording on to you. I already have it. I can pass the recording on to you for you to distribute.
Okay, and also we should probably contact the leadership of that group. I thought it was very interesting, and they've done a lot of work that we definitely want to share with our team as we get going here.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anything else about that?
No, unless anyone had any questions.
Okay. So I want to move on and talk a little bit about advocacy and creating an advocacy team for this group. There are as many of you know, there are a lot of issues that are happening right now with ACP and so forth. And we really have not done a good job about being an advocate and really helping our folks to reply to that, to a lot of those issues that are going on. Excuse me. And so for me, there was one thing in particular that that I thought was of particular interest. But before I get to that we just talked about the need, of course, the digital equity plans that are being developed, and we definitely want to review those and provide our feedback and input about that. And then, so there's a couple of other things that are important. One is the Universal Service Fund, and I know Mala has probably talked about that significantly. But I ran across an article, and like probably many of you, I really didn't understand the significance of what was happening with the Universal Service Fund. But there actually are some people in Congress who are trying to kill that fund and make it go away. That they're saying that there's already enough broadband funding going on, and that we don't need Universal Service Fund. And many of you, and you probably all know that the Universal Service Fund is one of the primary funders for E-rate. And so this really has become, at least in my opinion, even more important. And I really didn't understand the significance of what was happening at this point. And so those are just a couple of things. We know ACP is still a threat, and whether or not that will survive. And so we really need to step up our game about how do we communicate, how do we